Hello. So, welcome to this series of videos that we're going to be creating for Unit 16, which is developing a smarter planet. So, predominantly making these videos because we're going to be losing a load of lessons upcoming in the future. So, easy to kind of create these for something for you to refer to, for me to be able to explain what I'm looking for from you, that you can obviously use as many times as you need. So we're going to start off obviously with the first set of pass criteria. Um, I think we're quite lucky in the sense of that the unit is not one of the more technical units. It's certainly not going to be quite as heavy as either the previous two units that you've had from me. However, obviously, you still need to be completing the work. So, developing a smarter planet, and in order to meet these first sets of criteria, so P1, P2, M1, D1, I'm going to talk about M2, D1 in a different video. So I'm going to focus on P1 for this video. But it's going to be a written report, and there's going to be three different sections. So it's going to be one section P1, one section for P2 and D1, and then a final section for M1. I think you need to be bearing in mind that you could quite easily write War and Peace for some of these criteria. I'm not really looking for that from you. Obviously, if when we're looking at the higher criteria, you're going to need to be doing it in a level of depth that enables you to achieve that higher criteria. But for your P1 and P2, we're going to be looking at. I mean, the 750 that I've got on there is the lower end. You would have to be really on point to be meeting it with 750, but certainly closer to 1,000. So it's going to be quite a big document, right? So even though there's going to be three sections in it, it is going to be, or should be, several thousand, not several thousand, a few thousand in length, especially if you're going for the M1 and the D1, which really, I'll be honest, you should, because actually the M1 and D1 and later merit and distinction criteria are really not very difficult, in all honesty. So, P1, you need to be starting off with a discussion about the evolution of the smarter planet. And you need to discuss the items that are on that slide and how they have evolved with time. So, the three items that we've identified are radio to DAB, which is digital audio broadcasting, probably one you're very familiar with, telephone to smart mobile, and then greener IT. Now, you could, in theory, discuss these several thousand words in depth for all of them. The whole kind of evolution of the radio, evolution of the telephone, and even evolution of green IT are things that are vast, really. Particularly, I would say the top two items, which are much older. The radio is well over 100 years old, and I mean, along with telephones, they're both very, very old, comparatively, technologies. So you'd be looking at the evolution of the radio, which started off actually in conjunction really with a telephone. You'll find that they do kind of go together a bit, and all the way through to when it became digital, which was about the early 1990s. That was the BBC really who pushed that through, at least in the UK. And you'll find very few radios, particularly BBC radio, which is not DAB currently. Telephone, you probably wouldn't recognise one of the older telephones, where you have like the radio dial and you put your finger on the number and you kind of dial it by spinning your finger around. And you weren't able to do things like sending text messages. It was literally just to talk to a person. And all the way through to I've put smart mobile on there because the spec actually just says mobile, but the spec is quite a bit out of date when it comes to stuff like this. And obviously the mobile phones have really changed in terms of the technologies you'll find in your phone. You know, the mobile phone that we have now is different to only 10 years ago, which is when the spec was created. And so I've put Smart Mobile on there. It can also potentially include things like tablets, I would say. But generally we're looking at that kind of evolution from your telephone that you would put your finger in and spin the dial around in order to put the number in, all the way up to you're basically carrying around a mini computer with you at all times currently. The greener IT stuff, that's really more of a modern thing. I mean, IT as a whole is quite a modern thing. You wouldn't really find a huge backlog of history for that, not compared with the other two anyway. But actually, you'll find there's, again, quite a lot of information about greener IT, and this whole process of making sure that the systems that companies use are as eco-friendly as possible. They say that the IT sector uses between 5 to 9% of the world's energy, which is a tremendous amount when you think that this is such a new industry, really. And with that, it produces 2% of the world's emissions. Again, that may not seem a great amount, but when you think about how new it is, and you think about the other industries it's up against, I mean, you would expect some of the more what's what I'm looking for? I can't think, but industries like coal and those sorts of things to be producing, and automotive to be producing far more. But actually, you wouldn't necessarily expect potentially the IT industry to be making really a mark. But because there's so much obviously processing that happens, particularly with the increase of AI within industries, obviously within day-to-day life, we need more and more energy to be able to cope with this. So you could potentially discuss these in huge amounts of depth. What I'm looking for you to discuss are obviously how it has evolved, so an impact that it has had on day-to-day life and businesses. So we've got some bullet points here. So we've got speed processes. So how has it improved the amount of the speed that things can be processed in? Obviously, it depends on the industry. You've got efficiency. So how has it improved or not efficiency? I've got a reduction. That should be waste, not weight. Reduction in waste and inefficiency. I guess that kind of does go in with the point above, but the point, ultimately, you're just going to be taking some of these points, just discussing them. Okay, so when we talk about waste, it's like things that happen within a role, and then you just kind of get rid of them afterwards. It's a bit of a waste, really. Harnessing natural and renewable resources. So, have any of these things happened in any of these items here? And you would say possibly a bit, especially with the Smart Mobile, I would say. The digital radio is probably, at a guess, not as well used as it was 20 years ago. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and it probably exists more in the realm of things like podcasts these days through things like Spotify. But Spotify, of course, is not a radio. You've also got things like impacts for human, and these are all of these points are what the awarding body have specified, by the way. So you've got reduction in manpower requirements. So do you need to hire less staff? This is obviously one of the big concerns about the advent of AI and how frequently it is used in businesses, that people are concerned about, will people lose their jobs because of the AI? So has that happened? But also, you could look at other things. Has the improvement in the smarter planet, the IT, had an impact in terms of reduction in manpower requirements? So think about it as an example of that could be when you go to supermarket, there are a number of self-service checkouts these days that in the past would have been people scanning your goods, and obviously now those people are out of a job. So that could be an example of that. You've also got a bullet point in terms of improvement of quality of life. This is always in the eye of the beholder, really, because one person's quality of life improvement might be another person's. They hear it and they're like, oh God, So, but as long as you can kind of justify this could be an improvement in quality of life, let's say from my perspective, and this is purely personal opinion, the idea of being on a mobile phone all day is pretty hellish. But there are certain students, you guys, or at least looks to me, to us, as slightly older people, in fact, they literally do not get off their phone. I think that's quite sad. But you might like that. So, each to their own, I guess. So, you might say that is a quality of life, maybe. I don't know. So, I don't think it's tremendously difficult to ask this P1. It's just about addressing these points that we have here. Do be careful with how you write it. Obviously, you're going to want referencing within it. You're going to want balanced references, really, so you don't just want stuff that's backing up your own opinion. But it's not particularly challenging criteria, I would say. You obviously just got to make sure that you put the time and effort into it, and you should be able to meet it. So as long as you kind of back up what you're saying with balanced opinions, then you should be fine. So that is what we're looking for, an essay on these three things. And I've got on here, we're looking for between 300 or 400 words for each item. I would say a minimum of that. You might struggle to discuss every single one of these items in 300 or 400 words, but at the same time, if you select a range of them, then you should be all good. Okay, I'll finish this video off and we'll move on to later criteria in subsequent videos.